Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. Today on the show, the Timberwolves have signed Austin Rivers as a depth piece for the roster. How much could we expect Austin Rivers to play? What does the backcourt rotation look like? Was this a good signing? And how will the Wolves fill out the rest of the roster before the season starts? There's still a couple spots left. Plus, a little more Summer League talk as well as Las Vegas Summer League winds down. It's all upcoming on the show. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Happy Friday, everybody. Happy weekend. And a big thank you, first of all, for making Locked On Wolves your first listen each and every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere, including YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. You can also follow this show on Twitter at Locked On T-Wolves and my account at @BBeacon with two B's, two E's, CKEN. All right, we are at the tail end of NBA free agency. We're 2 weeks into free agency now. Yet the Wolves have made another move. They had 3 empty roster spots at the start of this week. They now only have 2. Timberwolves signed Austin Rivers late on Thursday, according to Adrian Wojnarowski. So I want to talk a little bit about that signing, what it means for the Timberwolves' depth, what the backcourt rotation could look like this year, and how they might fill out the rest of the roster now with still a couple of spots remaining. And, we're, believe it or not, just 2 months away from training camp, basically. So that's what I want to do here today. We'll close the show with a little bit more Summer League talk as Vegas kind of winds down. So we'll get to that as well here in a little bit. First, let's talk about Austin Rivers. So he's obviously a name that even casual basketball fans are very familiar with. He's played on a lot of playoff teams. Everyone knows his dad is Doc Rivers. So it's perhaps more noticeable of a signing to casual fans and Timberwolves fans and NBA fans in general. But I don't know that it's going to have that much impact on the actual rotation. I actually just talked about on Thursday's show about how I didn't think the Wolves were going to trade. The example I gave was the fake Bleacher Report trade of the Wolves potentially, could they trade Naz Reid for Shake Milton from the Sixers, for more perimeter scoring and perimeter creation. And I said no. I said that didn't make sense. I didn't think they needed more of that on the perimeter. I didn't think they needed more backcourt depth. I thought they'd, add one piece, but I didn't think it would be a legit piece that could potentially be part of the rotation. Well, I was wrong. I mean, obviously this didn't come in the form of a trade, but Austin Rivers has been in the rotation at basically every stop that he's been on. Obviously, he had that weird half season with the Knicks, and they let him go, and he signed with the Nuggets, but he spent the last year and a half in Denver. He is a player that expects to play, and I really don't know at this point, sitting here right now on July 15th, what this backcourt rotation is going to look like for the Wolves. Let's talk about the Austin Rivers as a player, and before we get to the actual implications on the rotation. So let's go there. Austin Rivers as a player is still a solid perimeter depth piece, is how I would describe him as. I don't expect him to be, he's certainly not a starter for this team. He's certainly not the first guy off the bench, and he hasn't been for a few years. But as a player, he is an effective combo guard. He's got enough size to play both guard positions. He's basically about 6'4" with good length. He's always been kind of I shouldn't say always, early in his career, he was not a good three-point shooter, but he's improved drastically. 34% last year, just a hair under 37% the year prior to that, 36% before that. So for his career, he's 34.9, so basically 35% from three for his career. But if you look at the last 3 seasons, he's much higher than that. He's, I guess not much higher, 35.5%, so about a point higher than what he is for his career. But he's a good three-point shooter. He can shoot the three. He's also still pretty good getting into the paint. He's not ultra athletic, and of course now he's 30 years old, but he has kind of a little bit of a jab step type move that he can use to get into the paint and create for himself or others. He's certainly not a pure point guard, but he can initiate offense, and I'd put him in that same category as Bryn Forbes in that regard. Obviously, Forbes is a better shooter and is a little bit smaller, and they're not the same players, but both of them are best cast as a shooting guard that isn't the primary creator, but can create off the bounce if they need to, given rotations, and we may see that. Of course, the history there is he was a high pick by New Orleans, which at the time, this was now 10 years ago, but Dell Demps, who's currently in the Timberwolves front office as an assistant GM, was running the front office in New Orleans and drafted Austin Rivers 10th overall for New Orleans He was a little bit disappointing given his status as a high lottery pick. I thought he was overrated for the first few years of his career. It was kind of a running joke between me and my friends. I thought he was one of the most overrated players in the league because of his name and where he was drafted, but he wasn't very good. But then when he went to the Clippers and actually played for his dad, he found a role as a pretty solid bench guy. He actually started there was about a season and a half where he started for the Clippers in the 16-18 range and scored a little bit. The three-pointer improved to over 37%. He became a pretty solid all-around player. The defense has always been decent. Then he bounced from Washington to Houston to the Knicks and then spent the last season and a half playing for the Nuggets. And, of course, Tim Connolly signed him the last 2 years, initially to a 10-day deal in early 2021. And then last year he spent the entire year with Denver, played 67 games, started 18 of them. And, came back down to earth a little bit in terms of shooting the ball, but was an important player in their rotation nonetheless. And again, the fact that he could defend a little bit is definitely helpful. Bryn Forbes, Jalen Noel, not the best defenders. I think the Wolves were looking at this and saying, we need somebody with a little bit of size. Obviously, Rivers isn't huge, but he's bigger than, say, Jordan McLaughlin. We need somebody with a little bit of size. Forbes is small, McLaughlin's small. Forbes and Noel aren't great defenders. We need somebody with a little bit of size behind D'Angelo Russell and Anthony Edwards. And, of course, Jaden McDaniels, Taurean Prince, Kyle Anderson, those guys are playing the 3 and the 4 in certain lineups. You need somebody that can defend a little bit in the backcourt with size besides Anthony Edwards. And I think that's kind of the main reasoning behind this signing, beyond the fact that this is a depth signing at the minimum deal, most certainly. Another thing to note about Rivers is he's been in the playoffs in 7 of the last 8 seasons, and I think a lot of times we can kind of overstate the impact of somebody with playoff experience. That certainly can be overstated. But the Wolves no doubt looked at the roster and said, okay, well, yeah, everyone on the roster except for the rookies now has quote-unquote playoff experience because they all played last year in the playoffs. But no Patrick Beverley. Taurean Prince would be the only other one besides D'Lo's brief trip to the playoffs with Brooklyn and Towns' brief trip to the playoffs with Jimmy Butler several years ago. There isn't a ton of actual playoff experience here. Well, obviously Rudy Gobert, I guess. But certainly in the backcourt, you lose Patrick Beverley, and you're looking at Prince and Gobert as basically your only guys that have that playoff experience. You bring in somebody that's been to the playoffs in 7 of the last 8 years, has played in Los Angeles, has been on some good teams, and is familiar, of course, with Tim Connolly, and, of course, Dell Demps as well. They know him as a person. They know how he could fit in. I think there's certainly something there, to why he was the addition to kind of round out that backcourt rotation. So I want to talk a little bit more about the rotation now, given this signing, and then we'll jump to some Summer League here in just a moment. First, though, let's talk about our friends over at BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your betting needs and sports info. You can find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including Major League Baseball, which is, of course, now headed into the All-Star break. Early next week is Home Run Derby. I'm sure that Home Run Derby props will be on there. Major League Baseball All-Star Game is next Tuesday. And then, of course, NFL preseason football. We're like 3 weeks away from the start of preseason, and, of course, that'll be available to bet on BetOnline.net. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sport wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. Plus, BetOnline.net remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. BetOnline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite sports and events, including MMA, boxing, and golf. You can head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, let's talk about the implications of the Rivers signing regarding the Timberwolves' potential rotation. So coming into this week, I think this was Monday or Tuesday's show, probably Tuesday, I talked a little bit about the minutes breakdown, where I think the Wolves sit currently in terms of who's playing how many minutes and at what position. And I don't know that the Austin Rivers signing really changes it all that much. I think we've still got our clear, really top 9 guys in the rotation, right? D'Angelo Russell, Jordan McLaughlin at the point guard spot, Anthony Edwards, Jalen Noel at the 2, if you will. Obviously, some of these are pretty interchangeable depending on lineups and matchups. McDaniels and Taurean Prince at the 3, Karl-Anthony Towns and Kyle Anderson at the 4, and Rudy Gobert at the 5. That's your top 9. Now, what's the line behind that look like? How many minutes does Naz Reid get? At the moment, he's still on the roster. We'll talk about the end of the roster here in a second. Will he remain on the roster? I don't know. But how many minutes does he get? Now you look at the next 2 names that are on the list. That's Austin Rivers and Bryn Forbes. Now, they're both veteran minimum additions. They're not being paid a lot of money. So how much are they really going to play? What's the expectation in terms of their playing time? Do the Wolves just play matchups? Are they going to give Forbes or Rivers the chance to play some backup point guard minutes? if maybe Jordan McLaughlin's not the best matchup, regarding his size, or if they need some more creation offensively, is it Austin Rivers that gets the call at backup point instead of Jordan McLaughlin? Do the Wolves look to go small in some cases? Obviously, the whole point of adding Gobert is to go big with Karl-Anthony Towns and Gobert in the front court. But in small lineups, I mean, do you slide Edwards back to the 3 where he played so much time last year? You put McDaniels at the 4, Towns or Gobert at the 5, and then it could be Russell and Noel in the backcourt. It could be Russell and Rivers in the backcourt. It could be McLaughlin and Rivers. Any combination of those guys. I still tend to think that as of today, those are your top 9. And then it's going to depend on matchups from night to night. Is it Austin Rivers? Is it Bryn Forbes in the backcourt? And how many minutes does Naz Reid get? I don't think you're going to see very many games. I mean, I listed 9 guys, but all 12 of those guys are not going to play regularly. There's not going to be a 12-man rotation. And to include Naz Reid, Bryn Forbes, and Austin Rivers, that's a 12-man rotation. If you're assuming that McLaughlin and Noel are also part of the rotation, obviously Prince and Anderson are. So this team now legit goes 12 deep, and that's before we even get to Wendell Moore Jr., and then the guys who haven't actually signed a contract yet, who we'll talk about in a minute, including Josh Minott. So you've got a legit top 12 with no rookies in it, with guys that have all played rotation minutes on a playoff team to a man. Russell, McLaughlin, Edwards, Noel, McDaniels, Prince, Towns, Anderson, Gobert, Naz, Bryn Forbes, and Austin Rivers have all been part of playoff teams. They've all played significant minutes in the NBA. That's 12 deep. So who's the odd man out? On any given night, it could be Forbes, or it could be Rivers, or Naz Reid may not even see the floor if Towns and Gobert can keep themselves out of foul trouble and the Wolves choose to stagger those guys and go small at times with only one on the floor, and perhaps Anderson at the 4, McDaniels at the 4, or even Taurean Prince at the 4. So lots of options. Clearly the Wolves are building themselves a roster that's flush with flexibility and versatility, the ability to do multiple things, and that clearly is important to Tim Connolly and Chris Finch, for that matter. In terms of the end of the roster, there's still 2 spots available. The Wolves still have their biannual exception and could still sign somebody else for the minimum. They obviously have not signed their 2-way guys either. So Nate Knight currently has a qualified offer out as a restricted free agent. He, of course, was a 2-way player last year. The Wolves could sign, and I think this is the most likely scenario. I think they give Nate Knight a deal to actually be on the roster, and then they offer a 2-way to Josh Minott. They probably sign one other player for the actual roster, and then they go out and they find a 2-way guy. We'll talk about Summer League here in a minute. There's a couple players in Summer League that could be options for that second 2-way contract. Or the other way they could go is Nate Knight could end up back on a 2-way deal if he doesn't find an offer anywhere else, and the Wolves say, hey, this is what we have, you can take it or leave it. Then Nate Knight could be back on a 2-way. Josh Minott may actually make the roster, or maybe he signs a 2-way, and the Wolves go out and sign somebody else, and your 2-ways are Knight, Minott, and then they find 2 other players to sign to the active roster. Maybe there's one at the biannual exception. There's some veteran depth guys with familiarity with Conley out there, like a Paul Millsap is still out there. I don't think the Wolves are going to bring back anybody like a Jake Layman or anybody like that, but there are tons of players out there that you could bring back on minimum deals or at the biannual exception to add some depth. So I think it's really fascinating. I did not think they would add another kind of combo guard piece. I thought they'd look for another more traditional, bring the ball up the floor point guard for some depth. They may still do that, but I would think it's Nate Knight, one other player to the active roster, and then Minott and one other player to the 2-way deals that they still need to sign. And at this moment, I'm sure they're waiting to see how Summer League shakes out. No idea, but maybe they have their eye on somebody that's on another Summer League roster, or maybe they're waiting to see who from their own roster, whether it's Keyvon Harris or Mariel Shayok or somebody like that who performs well in Summer League that they could then offer a 2-way to. All these things are possible. So going to be really interesting to see how the back part of the rotation shakes out. Or I should say the back part of the roster, and then also specifically the front court rotation it shakes out as well with Naz Reid and Nate Knight and how the Wolves allocate those 2-way deals. But look for them to add one more player in the front court, one more player in the back court, with some flexibility to play some wing as well. And then I would think pretty soon here we start to find out what they're looking to do with the 2-way deals. All right, let's close the show by talking a little bit about Summer League and a couple of players there and how they could fit in with the Wolves roster if they do decide to offer a 2-way to one of those guys. So we're going to do that here next. All right, so the Timberwolves in Summer League lost again. They're now 1-3 in Summer League. They took on the Brooklyn Nets late on Thursday, late, of course, Twin Cities time. And a lot more of the same for this team. You saw a couple guys play really well. A lot of the other guys on the roster just not bringing a whole lot to the table. The only really interesting note rotation-wise is David McCormick didn't play. He'd started, I think, the other 3 games. And George Condit instead started, the undrafted big out of Iowa State. He had a nice dunk, but other than that was fairly quiet. And the Wolves went ahead and gave Wendell Moore and Josh Minott both starting roles again, along with Keyvon Harris. For the most part, they didn't disappoint. I think the headlines from this are basically that we saw more Josh Minott activity, which is really important. We saw him do a bit more with the ball in his hands, or I should say with the ball not in his hands. He did knock down 3 threes in this game, which we hadn't seen him do since the first game of Summer League, but he pulled down 12 rebounds in 27 minutes, 7 offensive rebounds, 2 assists, 2 steals, and a block. He continues to rack up stocks in Summer League. Another encouraging sign, he still led the team in personal fouls, but he only committed 5 in 27 minutes when he'd been 6 or more in the past couple of games. But 14 and 12 overall for him, plus the 2 assists, 2 steals, and a block. 3 made threes on 5 attempts. He had all those offensive rebounds, but he struggled to convert on putbacks. He shot just 5 of 17 overall from the floor. So, of course, 14 points on 17 shots isn't what you want. But Josh Minott was also just being Josh Minott and being active. It wasn't necessarily him just trying to take over the game. He did that a bit in the second summer game, right? After he scored 22 in the opener. He tried to be overly aggressive in the second game. Then we saw him play much better in game 3. And now in this game, we're somewhere in the middle where the activity was still there. But he wasn't necessarily, even though the shooting percentage wasn't great, he didn't overexert himself with the ball in his hands because that's not his role. Even though he could do it a little bit in Summer League, his path to minutes at the NBA, and again, not at the start of the season, but maybe later in the season or year 2, is activity on the glass defensively, steals and blocks. It's getting into passing lanes. It's making the right pass offensively and knocking down open 3-point attempts when he has the ability, when he gets the opportunity to do so. And we saw that in this game. I thought it was an encouraging performance for Minott. I think he's largely been what we wanted to see, or we've seen what we wanted to see from him in Las Vegas. So that was good. Wendell Moore Jr. had a nice bounce-back game after some struggles on Wednesday. He scored 16 points on 11 shots, 5 of 11 from the field, only 1 of 4 from 3, but he made all 5 of his free throw attempts. And for him, the activity, and not really activity as much as decision-making and offensive involvement was better. So 7 rebounds overall, 2 on the offensive glass, 5 assists, and only 2 turnovers in 26 minutes for Moore, was making the right play. And we've seen that consistently. We'd heard, with him coming out of Duke, that he'd have the ability to be kind of a secondary playmaker type, make the right pass, shoot the ball when he gets the opportunity, the ability to get to the rim in kind of an old man type game. I shouldn't say that. He's got a little bit of athleticism. He's not exactly Kyle Anderson on the other side of things, but he's more on the Kyle Anderson side in terms of craftiness and the way he scores, almost kind of below the rim at times than he is, an athlete like a Josh Minott. But we saw the ability for him he could kind of do it all, in a sense, a Swiss Army knife type player. And it's all about the head on his shoulders. Can he make the right decisions at the right time and go about this the right way? And I thought this game was a good example of that. 16, 7, and 5 in 26 minutes, 5 of 11 shooting, and 5 made free throws for Wendell Moore. So I think he checked those boxes pretty well. Keyvon Harris, of course, has been the talk, I guess the non-Minott talk of Timberwolves Summer League. He had a quieter game, played 26 minutes, 10 points on 5 shots. He did knock down a couple of threes and a couple of assists as well in his 26 minutes. I do think he remains a candidate for a two-way role because he is a bit of he can kind of do everything. It's really decision-making and consistency with him. And if you have somebody that can come in and get hot or come in and defend a little bit, if the Wolves ever need a two-way guy as a playoff team, you're not necessarily just looking for high upside guys. You're looking for guys who can come in a pinch when you're down, hopefully not, but say there's a COVID outbreak among the team, or you have some injuries, or 4 games in 6 nights, or whatever that might be. You got to call on Keyvon Harris. He could do stuff on both ends of the floor. He can defend okay. He can score a little bit. He could pass a little bit. He could shoot threes well. He's an above 40% three-point guy in both college and the G League. So I like him as a two-way type player. Also a reminder, he is on an Exhibit 10 contract, so we could expect him to be in training camp as a non-roster invitee if he doesn't get the two-way call. And then also likely in Iowa because he'll get a bonus to play on the Iowa Wolves roster in the G League. So Keyvon Harris, I think, has had a very nice summer league. And then one player we haven't really talked about much, I previewed him before Summer League, but there was one game he didn't play in, and he's been quiet but solid, is Terrell Brown Jr. And I bring him up because he had another solid game, 10 points off the bench in just 15 minutes. He knocked down a three-pointer, got to the line a couple of times. And he is more of a pure point guard, and the Wolves need a little bit of point guard depth, right? I mean, Jordan McLaughlin's the only other pure point guard on the roster besides D'Angelo Russell. Obviously, Austin Rivers, Bryn Forbes, Jalen Noel, those guys can all initiate offense, and in some order are the third-string point guard collectively. But Terrell Brown Jr. has played at a couple of Pac-12 schools. He played a couple years at University of Seattle and then played a season at Arizona and a season at Washington. He started 32 games last year for Washington and scored just a hair under 22 points per game. He only shot 20% from three, and for his career, he was 28% from three in college. He shot it much better as a junior at Arizona. But he can score. He's also a good passer. He's got okay size at 6'3". I think he's an interesting option as a potential either invite to training camp as a non-roster guy, maybe a two-way. Again, undrafted rookie, so he is just out of college, but he played 4 years, and it was at community college his first year. So really, he played 5 years in college, and could be an interesting kind of Jordan McLaughlin-esque signing. I believe he's got a bit more scoring to his game than McLaughlin. I think he's a little more athletic, a little bigger than McLaughlin. But obviously, McLaughlin's got the feel and all that stuff, and at this point, the experience. But look at Terrell Brown Jr. as a potential Jordan McLaughlin type addition to the organization. Maybe. I think he's the one guy in Summer League that we haven't talked about that did stand out to me a little bit that could have a shot at ending up on this roster here down the road. So Terrell Brown Jr., a name to keep in mind. All right. That's pretty much it on Summer League. I think they've got one more game this weekend. We'll talk about anything notable, of course, on Monday's show. We're still daily here for the rest of July, Monday through Friday. So we'll break down any additional moves, what the roster looks like now post Austin Rivers edition, and anything else that happens over the weekend. So we'll be back on Monday for that. Be back every day next week as training camp is, 2 months away, and the free agency period starting to wind down. And this roster continues to take shape now with some legit depth 1 through 12, some question marks at the back end of the roster, but it'll be fun to spend the next several weeks debating what the Wolves should do at those spots. A big thank you to those of you that do make Locked On Wolves your first listen each and every day. Of course, you can follow anywhere, or I should say you can listen anywhere. That includes YouTube. You can watch on YouTube. You can listen on any of your favorite platforms. You can also follow on Twitter at Locked On T-Wolves or at Beecken with 2 B's, 2 E's, CKEN. Of course, the Locked On Wolves podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. The Locked On Network is your local experts on all your biggest stories. And as long as you're making us your first listen, consider your second listen to be the Locked On NBA show. You can get up to date on the latest news and rumors in just 30 minutes every day with Locked On NBA. Locked On NBA, your daily NBA update in just 30 minutes. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.